So when you get your emails and notifications, sign up. We're happy to have you. It's very exciting to have all these people come to all these events and have a different way to connect with people from the community. I want to thank Helene, my co-chair. And it's really great working with her. And thanks to Arlene and of course to Myra for tonight. Arlene is the moderator and she will take over from here. And to Gil. Thank you very much, Gil.
Okay, so Mutual Admiration Society, my thanks to Lynn Ross and Helene Isaacs for organizing tonight. To Gil, who our IT, all around everything, never mind. I'm going to ask, no, everybody is muted. Okay, so I don't have to ask you to do that. And if you have any questions at all, put them in the chat room. And I'm not going to interrupt the program as it stands, but at the end of the program, we'll go through it. Okay, for my introduction, forgive me, Myra, but I am initially going to plagiarize some of your bio from the back of your book. Dr. Myra Weiner, internationally recognized toxicologist, board certified by the American Board of Toxicology, author of many research publications. I could keep on going, but the one word I saw to describe Myra's professional career as a woman in the world of science is trailblazer. Myra's been a member of the Jewish Center for about 20 years, raised her 3 children in Princeton, all of whom consider the Jewish Center their home. She's a member of the Library Minyan, has served on a number of different committees. Princeton is home to her and her husband, Irv Newman, another very familiar face of the Jewish Center. As for tonight's presentation, first of all, if you haven't yet, I highly recommend that you read the book. This is the commercial. Uprooting the Poison Tree. Myra weaves her personal and professional life together in an amazing series of metaphors, each chapter highlighting a poison and an antidote. And in case you thought this was going to be a book club sort of meeting, I think we're all in for a wonderful surprise. Myra, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Gil, first slide. Thank you, Arlene and Lynn, for that lovely introduction.
You need the link or you keep it in?
I'm delighted to share.
Okay, I'll send it to you right now. Okay.
Okay, the story of how my memoir evolved. It was about 8 years ago when I decided to preserve some of my stories growing up and later for my family and others who might learn from my experiences, and tackled this at first by joining the Princeton Senior Resource Center memoir writing group. And that was a good start. However, after 3 years, I had a few stories, but realized that I needed much more critical feedback and much more training. After all, I was a scientist who had written many technical papers, but not the same as creative writing, not the same as getting into personal subject. So at that point, I looked around for another writing group. Fortunately, I found the Hamilton Library creative writing group led by Rodney Richards. And in that group, each person could read, I'm not there yet.
Sorry.
Could read 100 or 1,000 words and get feedback from 10 to 15 participants. Through that experience, I advanced tremendously, learned about professional writing seminars and went to those. Eventually, I had a lot of stories. I ran out of stories, so I had to organize them in some fashion into chapters for a book. And for that, I joined Sherry Meyer's Writing Off the Page group, where I continued to revise for another few years. The book will take the reader on a journey, one that goes to some places you may not have been, research labs, a corporate workplace, chemical manufacturing facilities, and also many countries where I traveled on business. such as China, Belgium, Eastern West Germany, Israel, and many others. But it also will take you into many personal moments where I share the emotions of love, joy.
Shoot.
That's fine. You can have that one now. This is leading me into the actual themes of the book. And I have three passions. The first one that I'll talk about briefly is family, my love of family. And 1960, you see me with my sister Susan and my parents, Molly and Lawrence Lee. We lived in Massapequa Park on Long Island, and Susan is graduating junior high school. The next family in the center photo is with my husband, Paul, who I married in 1969 and raised our three children, Larry, Rebecca, and Sarah. And that was on the occasion of Larry's bar mitzvah in 1986. And then my current family, my most recent family, with my husband, Irv Newman, my adult children, and Rebecca's husband, David Smolar, and their two children, Lucy and Mason. Many stories in the memoir about these family members, including my dealing with my sister Susan's mental illness during our teen years, later raising my special needs son, Larry, and working on my marriage to Paul. All of these were very challenging and demanded a lot of patience and perseverance, in addition to my job. So there was work-life balance on a tightrope, really, requiring vigilance and dedication. Next slide. The second of my passions is Jewish identity. From a very early age, I realized I was quite interested and fascinated with the Jewish traditions that I was exposed to. I recall hearing the Shema when I was 9 years old in synagogue and being riveted. Later, our family, which was Reformed Jewish family, I had the opportunity to study for confirmation in high school and was so inspired by my teaching from our rabbi that I decided to continue my Jewish education along with liberal arts at Stern College for Women. And here's a picture of my graduation in 1966 when my friend Sheila Hager, I'm still very good friends with. And another element of the Jewish identity was from my learning of the Orthodox traditions. We started building a sukkah in our family, which was a first. In between, I dabbled with Jewish renewal, spiritual and meditation retreats, meeting a guru in Israel, and am now a proud member of the Jewish Center, where I love to attend services regularly. So this book also traces my Jewish journey as well as my personal family journey. Next slide. And the final passion that is included in the book is my love of science, which, like my Jewish passion, started at a very young age. My father was a physics professor and encouraged my interest. He often took me to the lab where he was teaching and let me play with the gyroscopes and balances, do whatever I wanted in the lab. And also took me on nature hikes with my sister and friends to collect bugs and rocks and other natural specimens that I saved and identified on my nature shelf. Finally, after I got to Stern College, I majored in biology, and that was great fulfillment of some of my interest in science. And then on to graduate school for a doctorate in pharmacology from a medical school. Later, I worked in the corporate world as a toxicologist for a large chemical company here in Princeton, where I had to continually prove myself as a woman. I was a woman in a man's world, and it definitely felt uncomfortable at times because I knew I could do the work and I just had to keep persisting and proving that. And I think that's typical of my generation. So my love of science has been both stimulating and rewarding and has led to some very interesting stories as I advanced in my career. Next slide. So this is the cover of the book. When I was finalizing the book, a mentor, Laura McCullough from Brookdale Community College, suggested that I use real poisons as metaphors for some of those early and even later challenging or toxic experiences. Well, as a toxicologist, I love this idea and said, yes, let's do that. In order to overcome some of these toxic experiences, I would need very good coping mechanisms, which I will call antidotes or emotional antidotes. So each chapter in the book begins with a short statement of a specific, carefully chosen poison to model the experience in the chapter, or it may have an antidote that was used in that chapter. And every chapter is different. So we have a variety of poisons and antidotes. And the ultimate poison, I considered the poison tree. Next slide. There actually is a real poison tree, and this is quite fascinating. It's called the mahanil tree. It's native to Central and South America. It is so toxic that touching the tree, the sap, or standing in smoke of the burning wood can cause blindness and severe irritation. It carries a warning, and these are examples in this slide. Its fruit looks like little green apples, and in Spanish, they're called the little apple of death because they can cause death. The tree was discovered by the doctor on Christopher Columbus's voyage to the Caribbean in 1493. Crew members reported to the doctor that they had severe irritation when touching a tree and eating its fruit. Dr. Chanka discovered that their poisoning was due to this tree, and he wrote it up in his diary, which is available online, and describes that voyage so many hundreds of years ago. I chose the poison tree as the key poison in my story because there were toxic elements in my family tree based on some childhood experiences. Hence the title, Uprooting the Poison Tree. This has been my task to deal with those early toxic experiences, and I did succeed, but it's a good part of the book. So in order to share the flavor of the use of the poison and antidote theme, I am very delighted to have several of our talented actors from the community who have volunteered to dramatize 6 separate scenes taken directly from the book. And they are acted by Ruth Schulman, Barbara Gantwork, and Lou Gantwork. And thank you to them for making this part of tonight's program available. We can now go to the recording.
Come on. Hang on for a second. Sorry about this, folks. Give me 1 second. Not the wrong passcode.
Gail, do you want me to read the passcode that was sent with the?
No, I've got it here. There we go. Okay, let's see if this does it. There we go.
You need to put the recording on the big screen. We're not seeing it.
Sorry.
Gil, I don't know about anybody else, but I don't have sound.
Sound isn't loud enough.
All right. Do we have sound? Are you seeing it and hearing it?
We can
Seeing
see
it,
it.
not hearing.
Not here.
All right. Let's go back to the beginning. And
It may be the sound on your computer. I had this when I tried it.
no.
Tetrodotoxin, a potent organ or blowfish, which can be lethal at less than 1,000th of an ounce if ingested from improperly prepared fish, a delicacy in Asia.
The scene starts as an office door is opened and in walked Dr. C.Y. Cao, an intense Chinese man in an immaculate white lab coat and piercing dark eyes. With a cursory nod and greeting, he began.
Good day, Miss Lee. Do you mind if I ask you some questions?
Sure. I tried to hide that his eyes made me feel like an insignificant bug under a magnifying glass.
Can you tell me how an electrical impulse moves along a nerve?
I gave a full explanation of how sodium and potassium ions flow across the nerve membrane, generating an impulse along the nerve. It was a good thing I remembered sophomore year physiology. I had no idea the interview would be so formal and detailed. I hoped this wouldn't take too long. Dr. Cao began with simple, easy questions, ones that any biology student should know.
How does a cell divide? What is DNA and what is its significance? What is the role of DNA and RNA in the cell? What happens during a muscle contraction during protein synthesis?
To my teacher's credit, I was able to answer most of the questions from memory. That made me feel good. His next question did not.
Miss Lee, why should the school admit a female who would only get married and drop out?
How could Dr. Cow even ask me this question? How unfair. I wish I could wipe that smug smile off his face. I planned to finish. I informed him promptly, looking him straight in the eyes. I felt I had consumed a dish of improperly prepared blowfish containing tetrodotoxin. Toxin meant to kill my opportunity at graduate school. Cow tried to impress me by tough questions, as if he were inflating himself like a blowfish to a female student. My antidote to his poisonous attitude was the courage to state my intentions unequivocally. I had to maintain a cool exterior to challenge his sexist attitude.
Through the 6-hour interview that day, the other 7 professors, more liberal than Dr. Cow, simply asked her about her interest in the graduate program or talked about their own research, much to her relief. In 1966, there were few female role models or mentors to prepare her for the doctoral program. The acceptance into graduate school with a fellowship was one thing. Completing the PhD would be another. Scene 2 takes place 14 years later in 1980, when Myra begins her career as a toxicologist at a large chemical company while raising 3 young children. The second scene is entitled Wearing a Mask, and the toxin here is pulp and paper mill effluents, PME.
PME, an endocrine disrupting chemical, which is discharged from some pulp and paper mills and can cause potent masculinization of exposed species, such as fish.
I noticed that women, even scientists, were seen differently by men in the corporate world. I had not seriously considered how I was perceived by males or how to change those perceptions. The 1963 Four Seasons hit song, Walk Like a Man, echoed in my brain as I began my new job in earnest. When the song came out, I was a sophomore in college and men were assumed to be in charge. Not much thought was given to women being in charge back then, at least as I remember. The lyrics about walking and talking like a man made me wonder in 1980 if I had to walk, talk, and act like a man to succeed professionally. It seemed that, yes, I did. My self-transformation began the minute I entered the office each day. I was no longer the go-to person for scraped knees, hungry mouths, and messy faces. I was the toxicologist in charge of important projects for a major global manufacturer. I consciously put on my professional mask. I should not discuss personal problems. No griping about anything such as tight deadlines, too much work, and especially sick children. Suck it up. Take it like a man. Don't complain. Go figure it out and how to respond. But before you do, keep your mouth shut. I wanted to be considered as a professional, not as a mommy with problems at home that could weaken me in the eyes of male peers. Also, no bragging about achievements, large or small. No one likes a braggart, especially in a woman. You'd be labeled a bitch. Instead, learn to slip accomplishments into conversation in a matter-of-fact tone. Men are more impressed with the casual style.
Fitting into the corporate culture involved much more than walking and talking like a man.
Perhaps I need to swim in a river contaminated by PME to become masculinized, like the poor female mosquito fish near the paper mill.
To be considered successful, she felt she always had to be more knowledgeable than her male peers. She prepared assiduously, reading all background materials, thinking of questions, and formulating possible solutions.
After all the groundwork, I felt ready to contribute at a meeting. Soon, people started seeking out my opinion. Others, less prepared, scratched their heads. I had answers, good ones too. When I had to give a presentation, I memorized my talk, speaking without notes to sound more knowledgeable. I was building my professional image and polishing it to a shine.
Now the year is 1994. As Myra progresses in her career, an opportunity arrives which prompts a conversation with Paul, her husband of 25 years. This scene is entitled A Special Invitation and comes with a new toxin, digitalis.
Digitalis, a drug derived from the foxglove plant. It is used to treat heart disease, but at excess doses has toxicity to the heart, kidney, and gastrointestinal tract.
On a January day in 1994, an unexpected letter arrives at Myra's desk, an invitation from People to People International to join a group of toxicologists and physicians for a cultural exchange in China. The group would visit hospitals and medical schools for both Western and Chinese medicine, see Beijing sites, fly to Xi'an to visit the famous terracotta warriors, and finally to Chengdu for China's first international conference on birth defects.
Oh, wow. The trip sounds so amazing. What an opportunity. I thought my recent publication on lithium and birth defects in the Journal of the American Medical Association was the reason for this invitation, and my company agreed to sponsor me. At home, I excitedly told Paul, "So honey, I've been invited to go to China for 3 weeks. The boss will cover my expenses, including first-class airfare, and we're allowed to bring a companion. How about coming with me? It sounds fabulous."
Oh, sorry, I'm not interested. You go.
Are you sure? China is just starting to open visitors. It'll be fascinating to see what's going on.
Yes, I'm sure. You tell me about it. I'm not going. That's final.
My heart sank. My mouth felt dry. His words hit me like a digitalis overload, wounding my heart. I was not only utterly disappointed by Paul's lack of interest, but completely baffled. What kind of person is not interested in going on a new adventure? I'm almost 50. What am I waiting for? Life goes by quickly. Carpe diem.
Continuing in 1994, this scene is entitled The Great Wall, and the final toxin is monosodium glutamate.
Monosodium glutamate, a food additive widely used in Chinese food that causes chest pains, headache, burning, tightening, and numbness of the face.
And a pain in the neck to some people. Coming home after 3 eye-opening weeks in China, there was a harsh slap of reality. Beside the usual catch-up with the children and with work, Myra had to face her relationship with Paul.
It was as if the Great Wall of China had followed me home and stood between us. But Paul was an unsatisfying partner who could no longer be ignored, especially after meeting so many happily married couples who traveled and enjoyed life together. What do I do now? As the summer began, I weighed the options: stay with Paul, leave Paul, talk to Paul. Finally, I asked Paul if we could go out to dinner to talk. I chose a Chinese restaurant. The irony of that choice. I'm not happy.
You're not? Why?
I want more openness. We need to share more of our thoughts, more of our feelings. I couldn't read his expression, but I pressed on. Also, we need to do more together, and I could use some more help with the chores.
the chores.
Is he hearing me? I need more from our marriage. Counseling might help. I waited for a response, but he sat silent. Will you go to counseling with me?
There was a long pause. Paul clearly had not anticipated her concerns.
You've surprised me. I thought things were fine. I'll try to help more, but I'll not go for counseling. Therapy is not for me, period.
I felt as if I had eaten egg rolls with an overdose of monosodium glutamate. My head ached, my face was numb, my skin burned. This was not due to Chinese restaurant syndrome. It was from the toxic conversation with Paul.
5 years later, it's now 1999. Myra has been divorced and started to make a new life in Princeton. This is the first of our final 2 scenes, each headlined not with a toxin, but with an antidote. This scene is entitled Adult Bat Mitzvah.
Sometimes I was able to see a hand helping me, God's hand, providing coincidences that are opportunities to help chart my path. These encounters expanded my consciousness as an individual with my soul open to that divine spirit. How rare such encounters, how difficult to achieve, yet how profoundly gratifying.
In December 1997, during a Saturday morning Shabbat service at the Jewish Center of Princeton, such a coincidence occurred. A Benot Mitzvah ceremony for 6 women was the main event. Myra had never witnessed this ritual for adults. Each woman participated in the service and recounted her spiritual journey.
Voice speaking to me. Now is your time. You have to do this. I was dumbstruck. Is God talking to me? What is the message? At 53 years old, I had never contemplated an adult bat mitzvah. Now a voice was urging me to do so.
The conservative prayer book, Siddur Lev Shalem, explains that God's voice is not heard in thunder and lightning, but in the still small voice or the thin sound of silence. To quote this prayer book,
The voice we hear may come to us as a surprise in moments of distress, at times when we are still and alone, when we are on a journey. Or we may hear the voice when we have engaged in extensive preparations, meditating, thinking, praying, or fasting. We may hardly hear it, yet it can be shattering, thunderous, sending us on our way, impelling us, allowing us to see clearly what we had not seen before at all.
Such was my experience with hearing a voice that day. It was no coincidence that I attended the Benot Mitzvah service. I had been given a special mission. The idea seemed suddenly right. Sharing my true self was my antidote.
and this, our final scene, is a celebration of the antidotes of humor and courage, entitled Middle-Age Dating, 2002.
I arrived for my first date with Irv. He was a nice-looking 66-year-old man, casually dressed, a full head of silver hair, soft hazel eyes, and a wide smile. To my embarrassment, my chosen restaurant, the Wine Press, was boarded up. I quickly suggested the Rusty Scupper, a nearby restaurant, for a quiet dinner. He began by asking the waitress,
Do you have honeymoon salad?
"No, sir," the waitress replied. "I'm sorry, that salad is not on our menu. What is it?"
It's lettuce alone.
Laughing, she took our order. Irv told me a favorite joke in a thick Yiddish accent as he grew up in Brooklyn in a Yiddish-speaking household.
The customer walks into a butcher shop and asks the butcher, what costs a pound of liver? The butcher answers, $1.50 and a pair of pants. The customer asks, what do you mean a pair of pants? The butcher says, if you start to bargain with me, I drop the pants.
I found his sense of humor refreshing.
People call me an SOB. You know why? I'm the son of a butcher.
His father was a kosher butcher in Brooklyn. The next evening, the phone rang. It was Irv asking if I had had a chance to email him a story about my recent trip to Switzerland and how I lost my passport for a third time. He asked for a date for the following Monday. Again, we had a pleasant date and had no trouble finding subjects to discuss. In between serious conversation, Irv sprinkled in his vast repertoire of jokes and puns and kept me smiling. After the third Monday night date, I got suspicious he might be seeing someone else.
So, what would you like to do on our next date?
I'd like to go out on a weekend. I wanted to find out if he was dating another woman.
Okay, sure.
When that Sunday arrived, I had planned a lovely day at the grounds for sculpture. Irv joked about the titles for the more abstract pieces. At one very abstract sculpture, he asked me to think of a name for the piece. You tell me, I said.
Clean teeth, because there's no plaque.
After dating a month, something happened that changed our budding relationship. I was diagnosed with breast cancer during a routine screening. I told myself I could deal with this challenge. Since I was a teenager, I had developed a strong faith, which helped me to accept the bad as well as the good as part of God's plan. Though I was worried, I viewed my cancer as just another roadblock. But I would need all my strength, plus all the help from family and friends that I could muster.
Everyone came through. Family, friends, members of her new Jewish community in Princeton. They drove her to doctor's visits, brought food, even stayed with her. Within days, she had a lumpectomy at Princeton Medical Center and started her recovery from surgery.
I said to Irv as he held my hand and put his arm around me on the couch, look, Irv, for the next year, I'll need chemotherapy and radiation. It will take a lot of my time and energy. I understand if you want to stop dating me. Feel free to go and don't have any guilt about it. I meant what I said. The last thing I needed was to have someone hanging around holding my hand out of guilt. We were not attached. After taking a minute to think, he responded.
If we stop dating, it will be for a different reason.
Wow, I'm blown away. Here's a man who's not scared off by cancer, even though his wife died from a brain tumor only 2 years earlier. What a mensch. Though we had only known each other a month, we both realized that this candid conversation brought us closer to sharing our true feelings. He respected me for asking the question, and I respected him for his generous answer. From that time on, I spoke my heart with no bullshit. We talked about dating and what each wanted. Here was a friend to help me through my cancer treatments with good humor and with warm attention.
That
Myra,
last,
that
yeah.
was amazing.
thank you.
And the players, you were fabulous. If anybody has any questions of Myra, please put them in the chat room. In the meantime, Myra, you want to take over and talk, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that that last picture was, I believe, at the end of the acting was our wedding picture. Did that go up?
Yes.
Okay, and then I had a list of anecdotes, but that's not critical. If you have that slide. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, this is just a summary of the antidotes that were used throughout the book. There's quite a few. I'm sure many of you have had similar, you may not have called them antidotes, but similar coping mechanisms. Study and prayer were my favorites early on. Continuing education goes along with that. Forgiveness, very important. Honesty, all of these are great ways to respond to life's challenges. Next slide. And I want to thank the Jewish Center and the Arts and Culture Committee for sponsoring this event, to Lynn Ross, Helene Isaacs, and Arlene Opatut for their roles, and also Heidi Joseph. And a special thanks to our actors who did such a wonderful job in making parts of my book come alive, really. To Ruth, Lou, and Barbara, you're terrific. And Gil, who has helped with the Zoom recording and now also as host to the Zoom. So thank you all for your attention. You can check out my website for more information. There's an interview there that was done by Joel Goldstein on television a number of months ago. And you can find out how to obtain the book if you want. So I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Okay, well, I'd like to start, Myra, by just telling you a couple of things that showed up in the chat from Terry Anderson, that she's so proud of you and excited for tonight. With love. From Michelle Alperin, super duper presentation. Myra, Ruth, Lou, and Barbara. And now Polly has written, I remember being in awe of your indomitable resilience when I read the book. Do you have tips in particular you can share that are helping you get through the current plague?
Thank you, that's lovely.
Myra, that was a question.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
Okay, the question was from Polly Strauss, remarking on your strength. Do you have, where to go? Do you have any tips in particular that you can share that are helping you get through the current plague?
The COVID, yes. We're all struggling with that. For me, and this may not work for everybody, it's to keep busy and to find an activity that I really like to do. And whether it's writing or reading, doing a lot of reading, much more than I normally would. And expanding myself in whatever way, trying to exercise and get outdoors. That's more or less how I'm coping during this tough time, being isolated from the community and friends.
Now, what we have are a series of comments that people are saying. Terry Anderson, again, truly brought so many milestones of your amazing life alive. Somebody named C. Tiffald, terrific presentation. We loved it, and thank you for sharing your journey. Proud of you, and you inspire me. Sally commenting, what a good question, to Polly. And Heidi, enjoyed reading your book. Is there a sequel planned?
Right now, I mean, I've covered almost everything on the personal level in my life. If I do write a sequel, it will be travel stories, because I didn't have enough space and time to go into the details of some of my adventures when I was traveling for business alone in Europe and other places. And that could be some interesting stories there. But it is a big undertaking to write a book.
Okay, which brings me to Myra. I think a lot of people are probably in their own minds thinking that they would love to write a memoir of their own. What possessed you, and how did you get the strength to do this?
That's a great question. Actually, I didn't put that load on myself that I have to write a memoir and publish it. I just started writing stories, and I wanted to see how that went. I didn't know what the final product would look like. So just start writing. Sometimes you're thinking about something. I know I used to get a feeling in my head when I'm thinking and I get a line of prose or a line of poetry. Then I rush to the computer to try to get it out. So one technique is if you hear yourself saying things about an experience or an idea, try to write it down or get to a computer and type it out. And then you can revise it later. The other suggestion that I would make in starting is right now it's hard to find a live writing group because of the COVID. There are a number of them that are on Zoom. And the library, the Hamilton Library group meets every Monday from 1 to 4 on Zoom. If there's somebody who's interested in that, email me and I can send you the information. They're always looking for new members. And it's fun. You hear what other people are working on. When I first started and I was at the Princeton Senior Resource Center group, just hearing other people's work and hearing their stories would spark an idea. And an example of that is there was somebody in the group who wrote about their relationship to their sibling. And I had had a hard time talking about my sister. And something sparked from hearing somebody else's story that gave me the guts to tackle that for myself. So I think a writing group is great. It's kind of hard to do in isolation. The feedback is very important. So I recommend that and just start.
Myra, your career has spanned a few decades in science and manufacturing. You mentioned in the book the issue of disparity between men and women and their salaries, and your first interview, really put that to light. Do you think that things have changed much for women, or do you think men are just paying lip service to our need to be equal?
I think they've changed, but probably not enough for most of us. I know in toxicology, there are now many, many women. And I think it behooves companies to compensate people for what they bring to the table, regardless of their gender. And I think that message is starting to get through. So I think there is progress. I can't say about other areas, but I think it's starting to improve in toxicology.
So you think there's a more balanced ratio of men and women?
Yes, for sure.
And do you feel that you've been a mentor to some women in this field?
Yes, I definitely value mentoring, and I volunteer at the Princeton University. It's at the Lewis Center for International Students. I've been doing that for probably 10 years. And I take 1 or 2 students, grad students at the university, and we meet one-on-one for about an hour a week. And that's been very rewarding for me. I really enjoy that.
And your friend Arlene Gallagher, welcome, fellow Arlene. Once you write about an experience, does the experience itself become less immediate, or is it still as strong as it was before you began to write about it? Basically, is your writing the antidote?
Yes, I think that's a very good observation. And I do say in the preface to my book that after writing this, that it was a cathartic experience to write it, and that writing was an antidote for some of my past. And it was just a very, I don't know how to say it. It was a good experience, but it wasn't easy. It was a demand.
Did you find that it was liberating in some way?
To a certain extent, yeah. And talking about it can do the same thing as writing about your experiences. And that's why I've been so open in sharing all this stuff. I think it's important to share. It's good for me, and it's good for maybe somebody else out there who is facing a similar situation, whether it's in the workplace or in the family. So thanks for those good questions.
And Sally is saying that she admires your intelligence, kindness, and courage, all of which come through in the book, which was highlighted in the presentation.
Thank you. Yes, somebody was asking about how many versions and how long did it take?
Yeah, how long did it take to write the book?
Yeah, it was a long time, 7 years.
So we
And
can
I'm
expect people.
not writing 8 hours a day, I'm writing when I have time. During that time, I was consulting and I had other responsibilities. So I
So we can
definitely,
expect the next book in 2026.
or later. How many versions? I think there were at least 4 drafts. And I had different editors along the way. So it really evolved to get to the point where I considered it finished. And I thank all my writing friends and other people who supported me throughout this. It would not have been what it is today without all that help from the writers.
Does anybody have any more questions they'd like to ask? Okay, I'm going to hand this back over to Lynn or Gil.
Lynn, you have to unmute.
Muted. I just want to say though, Myra, thank you. The book is incredible. The book took a lot of courage, a lot of strength to write. And I so appreciate it. There are a couple of issues that we discussed that we have some similar situations. And thank you. And thank you for this presentation.
And thank you to the audience and the Jewish Center for sponsoring this and allowing me to share my story. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Myra. It was wonderful. It was
Thank
just
you.
wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you to the actors and
To everyone else, right?
Right. Okay.
great.
So we'll wrap it up. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks.